We are now joined by Mr. Atul Keshap. He's the SVP for South Asia, U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He's also the president of U.S.-India Business Council, or USIBC. Thank you very much, Mr. Keshap, for joining us here on ET Now. What do you make of these 25% tariffs that have been imposed by Donald Trump? Were you expecting a tariff of this range to be imposed upon India, or were you looking at perhaps some sort of a deal to be arrived at? And now what does it really mean for industries and for several sectors in India?
Thanks, Sumita. Look, I think it reflects frustration that the deal has not been struck. Indian and American trade negotiators have worked with great diligence for several months to negotiate an agreement that would reduce tariffs and reduce barriers to entry in both directions, a reasonable and balanced agreement. However, we've heard that that's essentially been finalized for about a month, but the deal has not been announced. This is, of course, a rather significant economic development. It will impact Indian exporters, people who export jewelry, pharma, textiles, manufactured goods to the United States. The U.S. is a $30 trillion economy. It is India's #1 export destination, so this will clearly have an impact. But my feeling is that this is also part of the negotiation. And what is needed now is for the two leaders to close the negotiation and announce a deal. So I hope that before we get to this point where these tariffs are applied by the United States, the U.S. and India will get it done.
Mr. Keshap, when you say that this could also be very much a part of negotiations between India and the United States, but we do know that August 1 is the deadline that the United States had set for arriving at a deal, but that hasn't come through. So what essentially you're stating, that there is still time for the deal to be arrived at?
Well, I'm in Los Angeles, California right now, and I just hosted our 50th anniversary special summit for the U.S.-India Business Council. We're celebrating our Golden Jubilee. So we still have another, 15 hours in the workday of July the 30th here in California, 3 hours less in Washington. So there's still a dozen hours to get this done before August 1 rolls around in D.C. And look, between governments, these deadlines are fungible. What is important is that there needs to be closure on this agreement. A lot of good work has gone into it, a lot of effort by both governments. It is important to get this deal done because India risks falling behind. The EU, Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, and others have made these deals. They have cemented a tariff line that's lower than India's. If India gets the deal done, then at least it can continue to be competitive, which I think is very important.
Right. Right, Mr. Keshap, but what exactly is Mr. Donald Trump expecting from India? In fact, we're given to understand from sources that India has continued to maintain a red line on agri, dairy and GM crops. But what is it that Donald Trump is essentially looking at when you say that there are still, a couple of hours to go for the deadline to kick in? What could be done in these over, close to 48 hours or perhaps lesser than that?
Well, the Indian side has spoken very clearly about its red lines on dairy related to how we feed our cows in the United States. And I think the American side has understood that. This has been a longstanding position of the government of India. On the agriculture, I think the U.S. would like to have more market access to India, just as India has very good market access to the United States for its agricultural exports. So what we need to do is come up with a way to enhance the economic competitiveness of both of our sets of exporters, both of our sets of investors, and this deal is a way to do that. So look, the president's tweet speaks for itself. He's obviously feeling some frustration about some of the non-tariff barriers, some of the tariff lines as well. But that's why you negotiate. And in a productive negotiation, you negotiate in private. But it's gotten to the point where it hasn't moved. And I think now we're seeing some of it spill out into public. This is where I would say, pick up the phone, close the deal, and take advantage of what has been done by the negotiators and enhance India's economic competitiveness on a global scale.
Right, Mr. Keshap. In fact, we are also learning that the government of India has released a statement wherein it is stated that it's taking all the necessary steps to ensure and secure our national interest. And as has been the case with other trade agreements, including the latest deal with the United Kingdom, what is your expectation that the Indian government is going to do when it particularly says that it is going to secure India's interests?
Well, my sense of the Indian government after negotiating with them over the past 25 years as an American diplomat and now in this role is that it is very sober. It is very mature. It is very knowledgeable. And of course, it is completely sovereign. And it will make the best decisions on behalf of the Indian people. I see this as a moment for India to determine where its opportunity lies. Obviously, the U.S. market is enormous and it's important. It's growing. It's strong. But it's not just this deal and the parameters of the deal that are at stake. Not just the market access to the American economy, but also the psychological signal that the deal sends about America and India, our strategic, economic, and technological convergence, giving a sense of confidence to business investors. I represent now in my retired life post-government 200 of the largest companies in America and India, and they want a signal of confidence between the two governments, that they can invest in one another's countries, that they can do things like artificial intelligence research, semiconductor production, defense production, with both the governments endorsing and supporting that. In the absence of a deal, it sends a psychological message of uncertainty. And it puts India potentially in the place of being a taker as opposed to a framer of the system of trade and supply chains going into the future. The U.S. and India have the same strategic challenges, the same strategic competitors in this world of great power competition. Will India and the United States work together to ensure their leadership on all of the critical technologies of the 21st century, or will that be the opposite? I think this is a moment of great importance, and I would hope that the negotiators on both sides can finally conclude a deal so that we send that positive message of psychologically to the investor community and the business community. This is a time for the leaders, I think, to talk to each other.
Absolutely, Mr. Keshap. Just a couple of few questions before we let you go. And essentially, we want to understand from you in terms of how businesses are now going to adapt to this change. The hope, obviously, is that over the next couple of hours, perhaps an interim trade deal or a mini trade deal will be arrived at. But in the absence of that, how do you expect businesses to adapt and, of course, realign their businesses to, the supply chains, which might see a change?
Well, I think business is still hoping that the deal gets struck. And business is mindful of how much we achieve together. Look at the NISAR launch today of the low Earth observing mission between the U.S. and India. Look at the Axiom launch to the space station. Business knows what we can achieve, right? And so there is a hope that the deal will get struck, that this is posturing in public, negotiating in public in order to get that deal done. But if the tariffs are applied, then business is obliged to, to comply with them, and it will have an impact. People will see, I think, their exports potentially diminish as a result of the tariffs. It may result in greater friction for the business communities, and there's already been a lot of friction between the U.S. and India in the economic realm over the decades. It's something I am trying to fix, because I think if we can be, frankly, just nicer to each other, we can do a lot more together. And this is where that deal creates that psychological impact, and therefore it must get done.
Absolutely, it must get done. It remains to be seen whether the deal gets done over the next couple of hours before that August 1 deadline kicks in, or will it take that much more time to sort of get finalized? But sir, you of course mentioned about the impact, and there is some sort of tension that's going on with respect to the economic ties between the two countries. Does this further impact India-US ties?
Well, look, we are still Quad partners because we have shared challenges in the Indo-Pacific. We are still partners in so many different realms of human activity. I mentioned space exploration. That's just one. There are dozens of other examples. We still work very closely on a global scale together. And I think that this is a moment where the president, who has had his opinions about India for a very long time on the economic side, on terms of market access and tariffs, is trying to close a deal that he feels will create a more balanced economic framework between the U.S. and India. Let's see what gets done. I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful. The U.S. and India have an enormous relationship beyond government to government. As I said, I'm in Los Angeles right now. There's Hollywood, Bollywood. There's scientific collaboration. There's aerospace and defense. The list goes on and on. Those companies, however, those investors will be impacted in the absence of the governments being able to show their confidence in one another. So, let's avoid that fate. Let's build the U.S.-India relationship. Let's not expose it to greater risk. This is a moment of great geostrategic uncertainty. We don't want to add this to the mix. Let's strengthen.
All right, Mr. Keshap, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts and perspectives on what the ask is of investors, and of course all those who are watching the events unfold. Remember, Donald Trump has imposed a 25% tariff. This, of course, is going to be combined with some additional duties. We will have to see the fine print of what this is going to look like. But Mr. Keshap over there, he is expecting that perhaps there will be a deal that could be arrived at before August 1. And that is the hope of all businesses as well, and us right here in India. Thank you very much, Mr. Keshap, once again for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Tonight. My colleague Nivedna Prabhu joins you next on Business at 9.